Muy buenas, ¿qué tal? Bienvenidos a Memory Card. Regresamos a nuestro formato Profiles, ya sabéis, el formato en el que nos permitimos el lujo de hablar con figuras relevantes de la industria. Va tocando a su fin la temporada, aunque aún nos quedan algunas balas en la recámara, y esta semana lo retomamos, como digo, el formato con dos figuras esenciales en la industria, sobre todo cuando hablamos de los años 80, que como sabéis es una época a la que nos gusta volver una y otra vez. A mí particularmente, pues bueno, ¿qué voy a decir, no? Me sugiere un montón de cosas, de recuerdos, y cada oportunidad que tenemos de reencontrarnos o encontrarnos con algunos de sus protagonistas es un verdadero lujo. Los de esta semana, dos hermanos gemelos, como vais a ver, muy parecidos, Philip y Andrew Oliver, los Oliver Twins como se les conoció, responsables de un montón de juegos realmente, durante aquellos años dorados y también después, como nos van a contar, que como digo, hoy se acercan a Memory Card Profiles para conformar un programa memorable por muchas razones. Primero, por eso que nos van a contar, por esa historia, la suya. Segundo, porque nos sirve para acercarnos también a una época de la que tantas cosas se pueden seguir extrayendo. Y tercero, por esa energía y el carisma brutal con que transmiten sus recuerdos y sus opiniones sobre un montón de temas. Chicos, bienvenidos una semana más a Memory Card, a Profiles, como digo. Vamos de lleno ya directamente a esta larga entrevista o conversación, como nos gusta llamarla, esta charlita con los Oliver Twins.
Al hablar del legendario tiempo en que la microinformática dominó el mundo del ocio electrónico, con permiso de las consolas que mayormente en Estados Unidos y Japón tenían ya un público fiel y un recorrido a sus espaldas, hay que acudir necesariamente a Reino Unido y a los nombres que sentaron las bases de una industria que fue referente durante más de una década. Algunos de ellos ya han pasado por Memory Card Profiles y por Memory Card a secas, desde aquellos que crearon las máquinas que lo hicieron posible, a los que con su juventud y amor por el medio sumaron creando aventuras inolvidables con las que insuflar vida a esos sistemas. Y en nuestro afán por poner en valor a todos ellos, hoy el foco de nuestro programa ilumina un apellido compartido asociado desde entonces a muchos de los grandes títulos que brillaron durante aquellos años. Hablamos de los hermanos Philip y Andrew Oliver, los Oliver Twins, como se les conoce en el mundillo, dos de aquellos jóvenes talentos que, como tantos, decidieron subirse al barco del videojuego en un tiempo aquel en que todo estaba aún por inventarse, y que, también como tantos, desde su cuarto de adolescentes, consiguieron cumplir su sueño de ser parte activa del desarrollo para casi todas las máquinas que brillaron aquellos años. Hoy aún vinculados al sector, con innovadoras ideas que hablan de su visión de la industria y de su espíritu activo y lleno de ganas de sumar al medio tanto tiempo después, nos abren la puerta a sus recuerdos y anécdotas en este nuevo Memory Card Profiles que viaja, una vez más, al corazón mismo de una época sobre la que se asienta en gran medida la saludable afición que hoy disfrutamos.
First of all, this is it. I'd like to ask you about the very beginning of everything, how it all started, and how you two became interested in computing and programming back in the day. How was it back in the 80s that you two young kids became interested in computing and programming?
I think we were kids growing up in the sort of the 70s, late 70s, and this was an era when sci-fi was like really exciting. So obviously 1977 saw Star Wars. I mean, we were just enthralled by Star Wars. It was the best thing ever. People were having sort of digital watches and calculators at school, and you're fascinated by this. And there was talk of computers. You never actually really saw the computers, but there was talk of computers. And then as we approached 1980, we saw things like arcade machines, like Space Invaders, the arcade machine. And it's like, wow, this is incredible. You can actually sort of control the images on the screen. And they were colour. No, they weren't.
Yeah.
Little bits of transfer over the screen. We thought they were colour. Fooled us for a few years. A few people at school, their parents sort of had computers. One of them had a ZX80, and that was a bit curious. We went around his house. But then another friend, his father was a lecturer at the local college. And he had an Apple IIe, and that was just an incredible machine. And we went around his house, and we spent way too much time going around his house. It helped that his house was between our house and the school, so every day on the way home from school, we'd kind of go there and we'd often be there for many hours, and we might go home and have some tea and then come back again. And we used to play Pac-Man. It was like a copy of Pac-Man, and it just enthralled us. I mean, we just absolutely loved it.
We just wanted to know how those things were made. I mean, that was the thing. So we were young teenagers, kind of competitive. They're very competitive in the games. It was kind of all about getting the score. But then over time, that's sort of a bit shallow, and you kind of like, you just want to know how this stuff works. So it came around to Christmas, and we sort of wanted a computer of our own to play around and see how these things work. It seemed like a good Christmas present, a very expensive Christmas present. So we had to put some money in ourselves. But we got a Dragon 32. Oh my goodness, it was amazing. It was full color, 32K of memory, with an operating system by a company we'd never heard of, which is Microsoft. I'd never heard of them. But you know what? It was a pretty good system. You could move little sprites around, and you could create Pac-Man quite easily. And frankly, we had to, because nobody had ever heard of this computer, and you couldn't buy any games for it. It did seem that we'd bought the wrong computer, because all of our friends were getting hold of the Spectrum and the Commodore 64, and we ended up with a Dragon 32. But it did us a favor by not having games and being very easy to program. And I had a keyboard and a sort of decent manual and stuff. And we looked, and we just made games ourselves, and we made them like, you make versions of Pong and stuff very, very easily that you play against each other. So we turned the sort of like, we were making the competitive games, but then we were competing with each other to make a better game and to learn how to program them. And I think had we bought a Spectrum or Commodore 64, we'd have been more than happy playing all the great games that were on those computers, but we didn't. We bought the wrong one.
Como en tantas otras ocasiones, los primeros pasos en la programación para Philip y Andrew vinieron motivados por la curiosidad y la necesidad. Dos ingredientes que, como hemos visto muchas veces, sirvieron de acicate para que multitud de jóvenes se lanzaran a crear sus propios juegos durante aquellos años. Su historia no es en ese sentido muy distinta de la de tantos otros, también en nuestro país, que hallaron así un camino en el que dar sus primeros pasos profesionales. Bueno, curiosidad, necesidad y aburrimiento, como ellos subrayan, algo que hoy las nuevas generaciones directamente desconocen.
Nowadays, I don't know if kids and people growing up know what boredom actually is. There's smartphones in their hand, and they go, "Oh, I was bored for 10 seconds. I just booted up a thing on my face." That's like, sorry, 10 seconds. It's like we'd have like hours of boredom. It's just like.
Yeah, I can understand that. But you know that in Spain, that's part of the conversation as well. Later on, I will ask you about Spain, somehow differently from what I'm going to tell you now. But in Spain, there was this outburst also of young kids and teenagers programming back in the day. Probably the reason is the same, because I myself asked many times my friends, why do you think this happened? Why is it that in England and in France and all over Europe with these 8-bit computers, there were so many young people that felt this curiosity towards programming and making their own games and starting their companies, and you know, and it was also something that happened here, and probably the reason
we didn't have Netflix.
That we were saying, like, you know, this is it. Maybe not having enough things to, you know, get entertainment.
I think the other thing is that we were fascinated by technology, and we're kind of creative. But the problem with creative in other fields is you keep having to buy loads of stuff. Whereas when you've got a computer, you can now be creative. Everything's in front of you. The only limit is kind of your imagination and kind of what you can make. I mean, we did silly things like reverse engineering pieces of code from other people's games, just trying to work out what they've done and how they've done it.
Hacking.
Like just doing hacking. Yeah.
We looked at how some of these games work, and in those days, you could actually hack into games and work out how other people had done stuff. I see you hack a PlayStation 5 game and work out how it's done.
Yeah, probably that's more difficult today. Yeah.
Sea como fuere, aquellos chicos lograron entender cómo funcionaban los juegos en los que invertían su tiempo. y un buen día decidieron que había llegado el momento de intentar llevar sus creaciones a otros usuarios. Ese paso clave que otros también dieron y con el que ponían verdaderamente a prueba su valía como desarrolladores, comprobando de primera mano si aquella afición podía convertirse en una salida comercial y profesional, se daba en un entorno aquel en que otros muchos estaban también atravesando la misma fase experimental.
So our first goal, once we'd been able to sort of knock up some games, was wouldn't it be cool to get this published, to get this in a magazine? And at that point, it was type-in listings. And we were successful getting a Dragon 32 game as a type-in listing. We probably have it around here somewhere. But anyway.
Is it the Rhino
Roadrunner
one?
Well done. Yes.
Okay.
Well done, you have it.
No.
Yeah, please don't load it up, it's rubbish. But anyway, everybody's got to start somewhere.
Oh, it's the first one, it's important, there you go.
Exactly, everybody's got to start somewhere. And once we'd achieved that goal of getting that published, it was sort of on to the next goal and on to the next goal and on to the next goal. And a competition came up. I guess the next thing that happened was a competition came up called the Saturday Show, which was a national TV show, Saturday morning. Half of them would watch one channel, half would watch the other. We had two channels back in those days. And they had a competition, write a computer game.
No, it was design a computer game.
Well, it was actually designed, but we translated that as write a computer game. Well, we designed it and wrote it, and we supplied it. And they were very surprised that we'd completely finished it and it was a completely working game. By this time, we'd actually just upgraded to a BBC Micro as well. We were so obsessed with the Dragon. We were obsessed how fantastic it was to program, but also of its shortcomings, one of them being games. One of them being not enough games. So,
BBC Micro had some cool games.
So we had upgraded. So in fact, by the time the Dragon 32 listing had come out and was printed, we'd actually moved on. We didn't even have a Dragon at that point because we traded Dragon in for the BBC, because the shops that we bought it from said they would give us a discount if we gave back the old computer and took some new computers. So we did. Anyway, so we entered this competition with a fully working game, but it was written in BASIC. That's the important thing to say. So it was a slightly different BASIC, and you had to learn the new syntaxes, but it wasn't a million miles off.
Programar en BASIC era en realidad un atraso, porque el resultado eran juegos y aplicaciones lentas y poco funcionales, como sucedía con el que fuera su siguiente lanzamiento comercial, EasyArt, un paquete de diseño de gráficos que acabó viendo la luz en Amstrad CPC. Así que con su siguiente sistema, el BBC Micro, dieron también el salto a la magia negra de la programación de la época, la brujería con la que se creaban los juegos de los salones, el llamado código máquina. Con él se podía sacar mucho más partido a los sistemas del momento, consiguiendo que las órdenes que se daban al ordenador a través del texto se ejecutaran en pantalla con una asombrosa velocidad, lo que redundaba a su vez en un mucho más productivo ensayo-error a la hora de programar.
So we were talking to a computer studies teacher that we have at school or college, and we were talking about what is this machine code, how do you do it, how do you use it, because we really need to improve some of the efficiency, the speed of some of the routines. And we gave him sort of a few lines of BASIC and said, that's what we want to convert. And lo and behold, he hand wrote and sent it back and gave it to us at the sort of the next lesson. That amount of BASIC, but in machine code, which was like massive. And it was all handwritten, and he was a teacher, and his handwriting was dreadful. But we thought, well, we'll give it a go. We'll try and get it working. And over the next few days, typed it in, had to try and debug it. But actually, we didn't have a manual of what all these instructions meant. But after a lot of effort, we actually got it working. That was just absolutely fascinating. And we just thought, we need to do more of this. This is so fast. So what we decided to do was write a sprite routine so that we could print things like a Pac-Man and stuff like that, Space Invaders and all this, on screen very, very, very fast. And at first it was like, let's just write this routine that is a nice general purpose, and then we can make lots of games using this.
Lo cierto es que para cuando decidieron dar el paso, el mercado ya no estaba interesado en apoyar con juegos al BBC Micro, su ordenador, así que para su sorpresa, aquellos encargos que empresas como Firebird les habían hecho, tanto de EasyArt como de una aplicación de creación de sprites llamada Panda Sprites, se trasladaron al 64K de Amstrad, el CPC. Eso supuso un proceso de aprendizaje para el tipo de ensamblador que usaba el micro de Lord Sugar, basado en el famoso procesador Z80 respecto del 6502 del BBC, Pero sobre todo, gracias a ese primer contrato por el que recibieron una importante suma de libras con las que se compraron su primer coche, los hermanos descubrieron que había futuro profesional en esa industria aún joven.
Before we'd left school, we were getting paid significant money to sort of do our hobby effectively, and there was that thing about like the magic of machine code that of like we typed in listings before in BASIC and we debugged them, got it working. We now typed in this weird assembler, but we did get it working, and it did take like a week or something to get this tiny little thing working, but it was magic, and it was a magic that will sort of never died. But we moved computer, and so we immediately had to sort of learn the next magic. So this was 6502 on the BBC, but damn it, they changed a chip called the Z80. But it was just like, well, it's the same principle, it's just different syntax, effectively. And so we just learned it. It's, I mean, not that we've ever learned Spanish or anything, but if you learn one language, you kind of know the principles, you just have to sort of map it onto another language.
Su control de aquel lenguaje de programación era ya alto, como lo había sido BASIC antes. Tanto de hecho, que hay una anécdota que ejemplifica a las mil maravillas su pasión por los ordenadores y la programación. Mientras el resto de compañeros de clase debían elegir entre el francés y el alemán como lengua extranjera, los hermanos Oliver hicieron una propuesta bien distinta a su profesor.
Can we make our language basic? And it was just a bit of an onward going joke, but this is the teacher that taught us the computers, and we actually used to go across to a college even though we were supposed to be at school. So we learned this when we were not sort of college age. We went across in the lesson that was supposed to be our language, and it just used to be a joke. It's like, it is a language, it's basic. It's like, we're not learning French or German, it's basic. So that is kind of a funny thing that we did.
La relación de los hermanos con el Amstrad CPC se afianzó en aquella etapa, y acabaría relacionándose con ellos como el sistema fetiche de sus inicios y el que lanzó de algún modo sus carreras. Conviene recordar que en ese momento tanto Spectrum como Commodore 64 ya tenían un recorrido comercial que los colocaba en un lugar de privilegio respecto del micro de su hogar, pero hubo un motivo por el que los Oliver acabaron apoyando principalmente al 64K de Amstrad en aquellos primeros pasos de la mano de la primera empresa que los apoyó en el sector.
The reason why Tony Rainbird, who was in charge of Firebird Software, suggested we went on to that machine is because he said that it was quite a popular machine. It was coming up, but the Spectrum and the Commodore 64 already had too much software, and yet the Amstrad didn't have as much. And so me and Andrew sort of saw that as a great opportunity. It's like, great, not too much competition. So we thought, well, here's an up-and-coming sort of machine. It's quite cool. The fact that it has the screen with it, because they always sold them with a screen, which was good. And so sold with a cassette deck, or the version we had sold with a disk drive built in, which is even better. So we thought this was a great opportunity to sort of get in there and kind of be the best. We didn't think we'd be the best, but we thought at least anything that we made would get published. Whereas we'd just come away from the BBC, where people were looking at what we were able to make and say, yeah, it's not really competing with Elite and Revs and all these kind of big games. And like, well, no, it really isn't. We know that.
It taught us a valuable lesson that we always did, and that is try to get onto computers and new technology first. I mean, we've made, over the years, we have made games pretty much for every console since, kind of on the launch of the console or on the launch of a peripheral, we have made games for. And it's really cool to be the first ones to break something in. It's like, it's difficult because you're there and you're trying to be the first and you find the problems, but it's also very cool to do stuff that people haven't done before.
Esa valentía, mezclada con un incuestionable talento, ha sido clave en su carrera, como lo fue en sus inicios mismos. Para ellos, hacer videojuegos era ya por entonces una prioridad y un objetivo vital. Pero como suele ocurrir en estos casos, su familia no terminaba de ver claro que un par de adolescentes quisieran dejarlo todo para centrarse en su afición, tratando de hacerla su modo de vida. La industria lúdica ya era una realidad, pero para la generación anterior resultaba aún algo desconocida, y los Oliver tuvieron que demostrar su valía dando un paso y después otro, hasta que aquello que por entonces era solo un sueño terminó por fraguar definitivamente.
We spoke to our parents and said that we really didn't want to go to university because we wanted to just make games. We just wanted to get better at making games. They weren't very pleased with that. We were expected to go to university. but we really didn't want to. So anyway, a conversation was had with our head of sixth form, sort of our main kind of mentor at school, who he said to our parents at the parents' evening, why don't you let them just try this for a year and then they go to university? They'll get it out of their system. Which was a good idea all round. But our father sort of said to us after that, he said, okay, you can do that, but then you have to go to university. And then he added,
you've got to have a career, you've got to make a living, you know?
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
okay making sort of £200 when you're school kids.
He didn't think the video games would be the
Exactly.
one.
There's no money in video games, you know? It's never going to last. It's
a passing fad. It's a passing fad. Anyway, so he's just, as a kind of an addition, just said, you don't have to go to university if you can earn more than me. Now, he was fairly well paid. In fact, there's a funny story there. He's actually was a naval architect, so building submarines and ships and frigates and things like that. And he was a project manager, so he was quite high up and he was quite well paid. And we don't know what he was paid because we never really asked. But what it did make us do is it made us focus on, okay, we've got to make sure that we get more money every month from our games. But funny story. A couple of years ago, we were actually invited back to the place that our father had his degree from to become a naval architect. It's called Greenwich.
Greenwich College
School. You actually see it in Pirates of the Caribbean in the movie. It's that building. Anyway, they closed that building down because the country doesn't need many naval architects. They've reopened it as a university, Greenwich University, in the same classes where he used to learn naval architecture. We were asked as guest lecturers to go and lecture on how to make video games because that's now where they run the video game courses.
It's kind of funny.
Which is fantastic.
Tras un primer acuerdo con Interceptor, un sello de juegos baratos que les pagaba 200 libras por cada nuevo programa publicado, llegaría su gran oportunidad con uno de los sellos de referencia del momento, Codemasters. Fue junto a la empresa de los hermanos Darling que los Oliver alcanzaron el estatus por el que se les recuerda, y el cómo llegaron a lograr un acuerdo comercial que los catapultaría definitivamente al éxito es también una historia que merece ser contada.
So we went along to a trade show, instead of going to university, went along to a trade show. We met the Darling brothers, just setting up Codemasters. They had a small single table, a couple of posters and stuff, saying that they were looking for new games to publish. And Andrew and I met them, Rich and David, and we pulled out some cassettes saying, we've written this.
The ones he'd already just pulled out, you've seen them.
Yeah. Some of them. If we wrote similar sort of games for you, we've got this idea for a game, Super Robin Hood, and I had a piece of A4 paper to sort of sketch on it. Unfortunately, that's been lost. Never mind. How much would you pay for it? And David Darling replied, £10,000. And it's like, oh my goodness. It's like, that's insane.
That's exactly right. Back in a month. And we did. We went home and we were just obsessed. It's like somebody just sort of saying, look, I'll get you a Ferrari if you kind of do this job for me, and you're quite capable of doing it. That's what it was. I mean, so we just went and worked absolutely stupid hours, and literally 1 month later sort of went back and they go, oh, hello, it's you again. It's like, yeah, we've got a game. Do you remember? You said that if we wrote this and we said we'd be about a month, that you'd give us £10,000. And so we literally sort of phoned them up and said, we're going to come to your office tomorrow, like year round, mid-morning, okay. And we just turned up and said, here's the game. And they kind of loaded it up and like, oh crap, it's like, that's really good. And they really got it.
They made it.
Al final resultaría que aquellas 10.000 libras eran una estimación de lo que podían ganar con los royalties de aquel juego, que se llamaría Super Robin Hood, y que la cantidad que percibirían en efectivo fue de 2.000 libras, lo que pese al bajón inicial tampoco era ninguna broma, multiplicaba por 10 lo que les pagaba el sello con que habían trabajado hasta entonces. Pero por encima de todo eso estaba la relevancia de haber puesto en marcha una relación que sería clave para unos y para otros. Tras él, que llegaría al número 1 de ventas gracias al gran trabajo de marketing de Codemasters, se pusieron manos a la obra con el siguiente, y siguiendo el viejo mantra de que si algo funciona no lo toques, decidieron utilizar casi todos los assets de Super Robin Hood, menos los gráficos, para confeccionar su siguiente éxito, Ghost Hunters.
So you actually had to shoot the ghosts that were in the haunted house with your backpack and lasers.
That was the film in the cinemas at the time. Ghostbusters 1 was the film. So we sort of copied Ghostbusters then, and then ironically later ended up doing the game for the movie of number 2, which you can see on the shelves.
The second one.
Yeah, but we kind of already ripped them off.
I love it.
First time round.
Hay una cuestión esencial a estas alturas de su historia, y es la de las conversiones de sus juegos para el resto de sistemas. Con Super Robin Hood, dichas conversiones se habían encargado a terceros, y cuando llevaron un mes después Ghost Hunters a los hermanos Darling, se percataron de que la versión de Spectrum de su primer título aún no estaba en las tiendas. El encargado de convertirlo para la máquina de Sinclair estaba tardando demasiado, y ante sus quejas por perder la oportunidad de venderlo como novedad, Codemasters les dijo que lo hicieran ellos mismos. De nuevo sus ganas de experimentar, y el hecho de que les facilitaron un Spectrum para hacerlo, una máquina que nunca habían tenido ni para la que habían programado, les animó a dar el paso. La cuestión era cómo afrontar algo que llevaría mucho tiempo robándoselo a otros proyectos, así que buscaron una solución de lo más ingenioso, y que sería un nuevo punto de inflexión en sus carreras, gracias al cual su producción se dispararía.
We were trying to work out, well, how do we get the game that's on the Amstrad, and this is Ghost Hunters, onto the Spectrum, and we need a disk drive, and we need an assembler, and we need all these things. And then we came up with the idea, I don't know exactly how, but was there a way to link the two computers together so that we could program here and port it over to here? And somebody knew somebody who kind of was an electronics person at Bath University. And so we called him up and said, this is our challenge, this is our problem. Do you think you can solve this? Do you think you can do something? And he came up with a little box of gadgets and wires. And basically, we were able to plug onto the printer port of the Amstrad and then plug the cable in, big ribbon cable, and the little box of electronics that he did, and plug it straight into the back of the Spectrum. And now we could actually transmit code from the Amstrad straight down into the Spectrum's memory. That technology and that was an absolute massive breakthrough, and I would say that it's one of the biggest things that kind of made our careers, because the Amstrad, we did quite well on the Amstrad, but we were able to port games onto the Spectrum. Well, Ghost Hunters took about a week. Because we had to learn how the Spectrum worked, we had to remap the sprite system and colour system, work it all out. The next game, which was Dizzy, it took a couple of days. It's like literally, and then we were getting Spectrum games down to a day per game.
Considerando que las ventas de Spectrum eran 4 o 5 veces superiores a las de Amstrad en el momento, es lógico que para los Oliver aquel fuera un tiempo clave y un dispositivo fundamental. Ellos no lo sabían, pero así era más o menos como se programaban los juegos de los salones y de consolas, gracias a un método con el que se podían probar cosas para ver si funcionaban en la máquina que hacía de destino, sin miedo a crasheos y reseteos obligados con la subsiguiente pérdida de tiempo invertido en escribir las líneas en cuestión. Y como ellos mismos han dicho, fue también fundamental para dar aún más eco al que sería su siguiente título, uno de los que sin duda marcarían ya para siempre su carrera y cuyo nombre está desde entonces inevitablemente asociado a su recuerdo. Hablamos, claro está, de Deeds.
After Ghost Hunters, we had this sort of map editor and side-on sort of idea, and we'd done the castle and medieval type thing. We've done a haunted house. What kind of thing could we do next? And we'd just gone to Disney World with our parents, so we liked Disney because it was the first time we'd really, well, certainly when going to America and going to Disney World was absolutely unbelievable. But we kind of like cartoons and things, and we were like, well, we want to make something that's fun and colourful and imaginative.
We want to make our own cartoon character.
And yeah, so it was like, right, we're going to design, cartoon character with all these little cartoon friends, which is a bit of a tough ordeal in a kind of 48K Spectrum to sort of make this kind of imaginative world with all these characters, and what are they going to do in this world, and give them little backstories and little problems and challenges to sort of overcome. But yeah, we made a really decent map editor, and obviously it sort of worked.
Ditsy gustó y gustó mucho, pese a que los jugadores lo recibieron con quejas por la dureza de sus puzzles, algo en que los Oliver no están de acuerdo. Al final hasta eso mismo resultó positivo para el juego, que acabó saliendo a doble página en muchas revistas de la época como ayuda para que los usuarios pudieran completarlo. Aunque su apariencia infantil podía hacer pensar que su público era precisamente ese, el recuerdo que muchos tenemos de aquel primer capítulo de una serie de juegos protagonizados por el simpático personaje no tiene nada de idílico y sí de muy divertido y desafiante. Y por cierto, una vez más, con Ditsy se demuestra lo importante que es dar con un diseño a la altura para un protagonista. El fenómeno mascota, que por entonces aún no había eclosionado, o no del todo, ya tuvo en esta suerte de huevo aventurero un antecesor de éxito contrastado con un origen casual.
You could say that we knew this was going to work and it was going to be successful and all this. We didn't know that it was going to be really popular. We just had this idea of doing another character. We wanted him to be a bit of a cartoon character. I was actually doing the graphics at the time, and I didn't like the fact that with Ghost Hunters, the little man running around, Hunk Studbuckle, I think his name was, his head was so tiny that you couldn't tell if he was frightened or happy or whatever. And I was sort of saying to Andrew, and I sort of drew, that I would really like to have more definition on the face. I'd like to have more pixels on the face. I'd like to be able to see his eyes. I'd like to be able to draw a nose that doesn't look like Pinocchio. It was like, well, there's now no space to put a body or arms or legs or anything. And it's like, well, I can put these kind of little hands on, like little gloves, and I can put little boots at the bottom. And the minute we drew it, it's like, he looks quite cute.
At first, it was fundamentally for the Amstrad Spectrum, which wasn't scrolling. So therefore, if he's really big and you've got to have it on a single screen, you've got nowhere for him to go. So you have to make him small so that the world looks big around him and looks interesting. So that was a kind of another thing that was kind of battling us. And had we created it on a Commodore 64 and just got used to a big scrolling map, we'd have had probably a much bigger character, and therefore we wouldn't have been focusing so much on just trying to get a big face on a small piece of screen.
Al final, las condiciones de trabajo que limitaban su creatividad también motivaron, como vemos, sus decisiones en ese sentido. Los atributos disponibles, la resolución y la búsqueda de eficiencia y de diversión en última instancia eran clave. Y aunque eso no quita mérito a su trabajo, sí queda una perspectiva de la que ellos no huyen para nada.
People have said that about these kind of computer game characters, the mascots, going, oh, the richness of the colours. It's like 8-bit colours, mate. It's like, that's what it's all about. It's attributes.
This is what
we weren't trying to come up with strong silhouettes. That's low res. That's what that is.
Ditsy fue un personaje, pese a todo, de éxito contrastado, que supo además, llegado el momento, dar el salto a las consolas desde esos micros de 8 bits que para principios de los 90 ya estaban cerca de su ocaso. No son muchos los personajes que en esos años lograron ese hito, pero este carismático huevo sí lo logró. Y lo hizo dando el salto en primer lugar a una de las consolas más exitosas de todos los tiempos, que había coexistido además durante gran parte de los 80 con esos ordenadores a los que los Oliver habían dedicado sus comienzos tras un viaje de la mano de Codemasters al recordado CES, el Consumer Electronics Show de Las Vegas.
We decided that looked like a really cool market. They sold games that couldn't be pirated at a good price, and they looked like they were games that we could achievably write. We actually loved the elegance of it as well. I mean, if you look at a Spectrum, no offense, some of those games look pretty ugly. I mean, attribute clash and pixelated stuff. Whereas the NES is still an 8-bit computer. It is in fact a Commodore 64 in a box. It's like, and we realised it's the same chips. They just didn't give you the keyboard effectively, and a slightly different sound chip, but a slightly clearer image to the TV. So it does look crystal clear. It does actually look really quite nice. And we were like, well, we could write for that quite easily. And we liked the idea of the scrolling screen. We'd never got across to the Commodore 64. But when we realized that we could program it exactly like a Commodore 64, we thought, right, we'll do this. And we converted, well, we actually wrote 12 or 13 games on the Nintendo.
Y entre ellos, cómo no, estaba Ditsy. Pero lo cierto es que esa docena de juegos se vieron afectados por la polémica de las licencias leoninas que Nintendo impuso a las desarrolladoras de la época, tratando de impedir que pudieran publicar para su máquina sin pagar previamente por el derecho a hacerlo. Y para cuando se aclaró el asunto de las mismas...
The games did get published, but by the time they came out, because they started coming out in about 93, the NES had its day because it was replaced by the SNES. It was too late.
Too late.
También llevaron sus juegos, como no, a las consolas de Sega, aunque en ese caso lo harían directamente con la 16 bits negra, Mega Drive, cuyos ports en realidad eran traslaciones de los juegos que ya habían disfrutado los usuarios de 16 bits en ordenadores, hábilmente replicados por quienes les ayudaron a llevar a Ditsy y CIA a las máquinas de nueva generación tiempo atrás, mientras ellos seguían trabajando en las versiones de 8 bits.
Well, there were some guys that back at Codemasters, the ones with the ST and Amiga, they were getting paid to write our games and make high-res, up-res versions for the 16-bit. So they went and wrote those, and then as the Mega Drive came out, they copied across the Amiga version. So the Amiga version went across onto the Mega Drive, and we didn't write those. I did write some Mega Drive games, but ironically, I don't think we wrote Dizzy itself.
Entre esos otros se encuentra, por ejemplo, Marcos Magic Football, cuya versión para Mega CD busca el que os habla, por cierto, se admiten ofertas, no os cortéis. Y hablando de Mega CD, también pusieron su granito de arena al catálogo del add-on de Sega con juegos como Theme Park o Syndicate.
But yeah, I think they probably sold 10 copies.
You can't go down there!
Un fenómeno intrínseco al videojuego de los 80 y los 90 fue el de las licencias de cine. Compañías como Ocean, como sabéis decimos siempre, supieron explotar maravillosamente aquella oportunidad en tiempos de los 8 bits, aprovechando el tirón de los héroes de la gran pantalla con recreaciones pixeladas de sus aventuras que sin embargo vendieron por ello bastante bien. La cosa, como no, también llegó a manos de los Oliver, que en más de una ocasión pudieron tirar de dichas licencias para sus juegos, y siendo como fue una fórmula habitual en la época, también quisimos preguntarles al respecto.
We came to that slightly later. I mean, our first one was Ghostbusters, and we did Judge Dredd from the Sylvester Stallone film, before we went on and did all of our Disney games. But yeah, Ocean did quite a few games. Typically, they were the Arnold Schwarzeneggers and the original Batman and things. And it was kind of cool. You're taking something that people love and sort of setting them up with the sort of... it's a standard gameplay, but you're putting them in the environment with the characters and trying to sort of like... You're Batman, you don't just shoot guns, you throw the... bat thing, whatever it is. You've got some new mechanics because you're trying to make the game of a film, and that brings in some interesting elements. I have to say, we made an awful lot of games of movies over the years, and we absolutely loved it. There were quite a few up there. We absolutely loved it because you're being part of a bigger entertainment. One of the games I personally wrote that I'm very proud of is Chicken Run. It's probably on his shelf. And the idea of working with sort of Aardman, who had done Wallace and Gromit, I was kind of like just so in awe of the skill and work that they put into that. And then to be able to work on the game version was really cool.
Claro que no siempre pasa que el resultado es tan satisfactorio como el que narra Andrew. Conocemos ejemplos de juegos que han hecho de sus licencias un motivo para el oprobio, y los hermanos Oliver tampoco se esconden al hablar de aquellos de los que se sienten, digamos, menos orgullosos.
I've got to tell you, because the thing is, you said the games sometimes didn't live up to the movie. Yeah. Now that was a cool movie. We made the game. Indeed. It wasn't a cool game. Right. So I kind of like to apologise. I'd like to apologise to everyone. Like, not every one of those games was up to the movies, you know? It's like...
You just don't know what the politics are behind the scenes in games. And we were being messed around by the publisher of that ridiculously. You can't see the movie script. You can't use the movie script. You can't use a Ferrari. You can't set it in Miami. You can't. And it's just like...
La evolución de la industria misma marcaba en muchos sentidos qué debía hacerse y cómo, pero está claro que oportunidades como esa les permitían volar libres, o al menos sin tantas ataduras, a la hora de desarrollar sus juegos. Chicken Run es un título con el que los Oliver se metieron de lleno en la generación de los 32 bits, por ejemplo, y al mirar atrás y compararlo con sus comienzos, también a nivel creativo, es fácil reflexionar sobre la enorme evolución que la industria había sufrido en apenas una década.
In the early days, it was like, well, just make a game, make another game, and it's like, I don't know what, and we sort of like, well, we'll make a sequel because we can't think of anything. When it was with Dizzy, we thought of new stories and stuff. In the early days, we had constraints of memory and pixel resolution and all sorts of deal. But then, as you made it up onto PlayStation, the constraints went out the window. Your constraint was
considerably.
Yeah, the constraint was the time frame and the money, i.e., the size of the team. I mean, people used to always go, oh, it's $1 million or whatever to make a game. And it's like, well, no, don't think of it in terms of money because it's quite difficult to sort of think about. We say, look, you've got this date, you're prepared to give us this money, that buys you a team of 15 people. Now we'll try to work out how we spread that, and we'll have 4 programmers, 3 artists, a designer and a writer or something.
El panorama es hoy radicalmente opuesto al que ellos vivieron en sus comienzos, y aunque en Reino Unido el paisaje de la industria ya entonces era lo bastante importante como para que 2 chavales pudieran arrancar sus carreras desde su cuarto, lo cierto es que su historia replica en muchos sentidos la de otros que aquí, en España, también pudieron cumplir sus sueños sumando a ese mercado con títulos de contrastada calidad que en un momento dado cruzaron nuestras fronteras llegando incluso a suelo británico. ¿Eran los Oliver Twins conscientes de esa industria hispana que crecía aquí de forma paralela a sus carreras? ¿Tuvieron alguna relación con alguna de aquellas míticas empresas de la edad de oro del soft patrio o sus miembros?
Once we were kind of into making Dizzy games, we weren't playing many games, so we weren't playing Spectrum games. But I do recall looking through the magazines of some sort of like fairly high-profile games and going, oh my goodness, it's Spanish, it's Spanish developers. So we were aware that Dizzy was selling quite well in Spain, and we were aware there were Spanish developers, because I do remember, I can't remember the titles now, but I do remember seeing games coming out from Spain, whereas you didn't generally see games coming out from Germany or Italy.
Yeah.
You'd occasionally see them coming out of France. There was a couple of big French games, and obviously Ubisoft.
Yeah, of course.
They had their foundation in Paris. And so we knew that there were some French games and then Spanish games on the Spectrum. It was very much a Spectrum thing. I don't think you Spanish guys like the Commodore 64.
You like the Amstrad. They love the
Amstrad. Yeah.
The Amstrad, yes. The Amstrad was popular.
And Spectrum was also very successful.
Yeah.
Not the MSX, by the way, that we've not even mentioned today, but the MSX is like gone. We've not said anything about it.
I don't think that really took off anywhere. I think that was a weird thing. That was supposed to be a few...
the Coupe and the Auric.
Yeah, there's lots.
El nuevo siglo y los cambios que trajo consigo no hicieron que las ganas de seguir creando de los Oliver se vieran menguadas. Al frente de Interactive Studios, que luego sería Blitz Games, Philip y Andrew sumaron con su propia empresa, ya libres de las ataduras de un publisher al que rendir cuentas. Y aunque la crisis que sacudió al planeta en 2008 también supuso para ellos un bache, tras años aportando su experiencia al catálogo de casi todas las consolas que llegaron al mercado, supieron reinventarse aprovechando las nuevas tecnologías y las posibilidades que éstas ofrecían. Así, por ejemplo, nació Sky Saga, un juego con un fuerte componente online y un concepto tan interesante como todo lo que desde sus inicios han tocado.
It was an online game. It was kind of a Minecraft meets Zelda, all online. So creation, adventuring, all together. It was a fantastic game. A great shame that unfortunately it was cancelled.
The publisher just decided to pull out.
Una pena, sí, aunque ese afán por abrazar la nueva tecnología sigue vivo en ellos, como su más reciente aventura demuestra. Los Oliver han sabido además aprovechar cada nuevo periférico para aportar algo fresco y diferencial a sus juegos, y entienden con su discurso creativo por qué máquinas como Wii triunfaron como lo hicieron. Y por eso mismo llegaron a apoyar algo ahora tan denostado como Kinect con hasta 13 títulos. Tras más de 4 décadas inmersos en el sector del videojuego y del de la enseñanza, para saber cómo entrar en él, algo que ellos comentan orgullosos, instruyendo a las nuevas generaciones, lo que hoy les ocupa tenía que ser necesariamente algo revolucionario en la línea de su historia misma.
Years ago, 7 years ago, Apple kind of brought out Siri on their iPhones, And they taught the world that you can talk to your phone, it will understand you, and it will talk back, no matter what language. That is magic, right? And everyone gets it. And we imagined when that came out, we were going, oh, this will be cool. Can you imagine a couple of years' time, we'll be talking to all the kind of NPCs in games, and all these games, you'll be talking backwards and forwards to them. What's actually happened is they talk to you, and you press a button back. And it's like, no, this is just wrong. And we've been saying it for a few years. This is just wrong. But no one's doing anything about it. And so we thought, you know what? Like we spent some time in lockdown and decided, let's do research and see, people must be doing something on this. And we didn't come up with anyone doing it.
There's very little.
So this is Richcast, and it's a new type of game that it's all based on voice. You talk to characters and they talk back to you.
We've got loads of assets, like graphics and sound and everything, all built into the software as well. It's all cloud-based, so we've got a phenomenal amount of assets.
Everything's free.
Everything's free. It's all collaborative, so multiple people can work in teams. And it's a publishing platform as well, so people can then publish to the world. They will eventually be able to take royalties, and that is eventually why it's a business model.
La rueda no gira para estos dos verdaderos titanes de la industria, que desde los cruciales años 80 han sumado al videojuego con tantos títulos icónicos siempre de la mano de la innovación. No en balde, ostentan el récord Guinness de desarrolladores con más juegos en su haber.
And how did we do that? We did it by making our own tools. We made an art package, a sprite package, a map editor, a way in which to get across from sort of one platform to another, so we could publish on a Spectrum and Amstrad. We made the tools so easy that we could make games faster and better than anyone else.
Y por ello, hoy este viaje a lomos de Memory Card Profiles es un homenaje a su historia y su legado. Solo nos queda agradecerles su simpatía, cercanía y esas ganas de recordar más de 40 años de relación con el videojuego, como si todo lo que nos cuentan hubiera ocurrido ayer. Philip, Andrew, ya formáis parte de la familia de Profiles, y desde aquí queremos mandaros el más pixelado de los abrazos y desearos que esa energía que desprendéis dure por lo menos otras 4 décadas. ¡Hasta pronto!
En fin, ¿qué voy a decir? Que son muy salados, que ha sido un auténtico placer de partir con ellos, que nos contasen pormenorizadamente todo lo que fue sus inicios, ¿no? Cómo empezaron, pero también lo que hicieron después. Y conocer de primera mano en qué andan enfrascados, aunque me consta que seguro entre el tiempo que hicimos la entrevista y la publicación del programa en algo más se habrán metido. Como siempre, agradeceros un montón que estéis ahí pendientes de lo que tenemos que decir, de las caras que os traemos con toda la ilusión como es lógico, y dentro de un par de semanitas, si todo va bien, volveremos con Memory Card ya al formato tradicional, digamos ya pensando en ese nuevo Profiles que si no pasa nada llegará pues, no sé, ¿qué? ¿Un mes y pico? Ya lo veremos. No nos queda tampoco tanto para disfrutar del verano, pero aún esto no está del todo terminado, por decir así. Un abrazo chicos, hasta muy pronto.